2024. I'm Lisa Berreau, the Vice President for Research here at USU. This semester we've created the Research Summits as a way to promote interactions between researchers through discussions about topics of current interest that broadly span multiple colleges. And so each time with a Research Summit, we bring you a panel discussion with experts from USU and from outside USU to bring forward current ideas about the research that is being done to address these important topics. Earlier this semester, in our first Research Summit, we talked about energy and the energy transition. In our second Research Summit, we talked about artificial intelligence. Both of those topics, as I think about it, probably also relate to the topic we're talking about today, which is water, which for our state, our nation, is a critical topic for our future. And so I hope that through today's activities that you're spurred with some new thinking about the areas of research around water, that you can have productive discussions with colleagues, and that you enjoy the social atmosphere and the food as a way to help just bring about that kind of atmosphere to create scientific and research discovery. And so with that, I would like to invite our four panelists to please come up to the front for the panel discussion. And so thank you, panelists, again, for being part of this today. And so I'm going to ask each of the panelists to briefly introduce themselves with their name, their area of expertise, and what their role is in terms of research around water. And so, Burdette?
I'm Burdette Barker. I am an assistant professor in civil and environmental engineering. And I'm also the extension irrigation specialist. So that kind of tells you that my field of expertise is irrigation. I do ag irrigation. I'm kind of an oddball. I'm an ag engineer. So there's not a lot of us. But it's kind of cool because ag engineers by definition are kind of a multidisciplinary breed. I spent several years in consulting before I came here, and my research interests really have everything to do with irrigation systems, their design, their performance, and crop water use.
Hi everyone, I'm Courtney Flint. I'm a professor in the Department of Environment and Society in the College of Natural Resources. And I'm a natural resource sociologist. My work has covered a variety of sectors, but in the last 15 years or so, my work has primarily been in the water arena. My work is really around how communities and regions and people respond to disturbances in their environments and how that affects their well-being and the actions that they take in response to those changes. And recently, I've been involved in a couple of great big projects, many with people here in the room. And my research is focusing on decision-making at local scales, looking at local water management organizations, particularly irrigation companies and municipalities. Also involved in a project looking at vulnerabilities to aging dams. So really looking at the vulnerabilities that relate to our aging infrastructure in terms of dams and the communities, the critical infrastructure and the ecosystems that are downstream, and how we can identify those vulnerabilities and importantly look to see how they interact to mitigate those risks. And so those are a couple of the water related projects that we have going on.
I'm Connely, Baldwin. I'm a water resources engineer and hydrologist for Rocky Mountain Power. And my main role there is water management. I did come from Utah State, bachelor's and master's in civil and environmental engineering. And so it's fun to be back in this role. And in addition to water management, helping with some of our FERC licensing aspects, and also kind of actually just managing a few stream flow gauges where we submit our data to the USGS, so kind of get in the field a little bit too. So.
Hi, I'm Beth Neilson. I'm in Civil and Environmental Engineering also. I am also at the Utah Water Research Lab. I am a hydrologist that focuses primarily on tracking where water goes, and that can mean a lot of different things. I've spent a lot of my career trying to figure out how surface water and groundwater interact. This becomes a really important part of us understanding where our water is going through our natural systems as we start thinking about delivering water to specific locations. I also am the kind of the co-director of the Logan River Observatory, and we spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to instrument watersheds really thoroughly to figure out how these watersheds respond and how they will change to our management actions.
Thank you. Now I want to move into kind of diving into the research. And so I'd ask each of you to maybe share a couple of examples of what you think are really innovative research questions, innovative projects that are underway that are advancing issues critical to water.
I think innovative can mean a lot of different things. In my opinion, some of the most important projects that are the most effective are some of our recent projects that are more a collection of projects where we are trying to figure out how best to work with the state to not just answer applied research problems, but also really fundamental research problems. So we're combining basic research and applied research to deal with some of our very complicated water-related problems. And with that, we're using the results of those projects or a collection of projects to help inform policy. In my mind, to be super effective at solving some of our water problems, if we can figure out how to answer questions that will inform policy that will help us address the issues, that kind of circle becomes very important to big problems, big answers.
So in my role, I've often watched the water laws in Utah, and there's actually kind of a forum that water laws are often kind of shopped through, and it takes a year to kind of get things vetted. And a couple of years ago, there was a water law that was passed that was pretty striking, where they allowed kind of safe water, which is kind of a pretty big deal when you're thinking of the current status of just prior appropriation doctrine. And I was trying to figure out why in the world that got passed so quickly, but that was my introduction to the Great Salt Lake Strike Team, where a number of researchers from Utah State teamed up with some University of Utah researchers and made some public policy suggestions that were actually implemented that within like 2 or 3 months of being promulgated through the strike team. So I think that's a very good example of kind of taking research and actually implementing it and making it available directly to public policy members.
I think I'll go to the sort of more global international scale first. I think some of the most innovative work that I've seen has been led by researchers, particularly Claudia Paul-Vostel, who I should mention because she's really leading this work. But really trying to understand how decisions are made to enhance the resilience of water, to adapt to climate change, to adapt to changes. And the notion that it's going to take the more successful examples happen when there's what we call polycentric governance, when it's not just a unilateral top-down government decision on what to do with water, but when the arena opens up and decisions and governance is shared by governments at multiple scales, with business and industry, with local communities and interest groups, when more people come to the table to look to the future on how to manage water and how to navigate challenges, better and longer standing decisions are made that have better outcomes. So I think that's been one of in the last decade or so, one of the most innovative things, and it's in that innovative approaches or ways of thinking arena. And then I guess I would turn to some work that's probably still global. I just know of it more at the national scale, and I think some of that is about how we map flooding and how we understand what happens as water moves through our systems. And I think most importantly, not just through natural systems, but through our urban systems and our landscapes that have a very strong human imprint to them. Because I think for a while, it's been sort of like, okay, there's a natural system, and then the water hits a municipality or an urban area, and it's just a kind of a black box. And then the water, maybe it just comes out the other side through stormwater, but how does water move? And then my interests then, of course, are in, how does that affect the daily lives and the built infrastructure and, places where people live and that kind of interaction. So the flood inundation mapping techniques and technologies, they go way over my head in terms of the technologies of it, but I think that's another innovative area that's combining a lot of earth system science with the meteorological and climatological science, and understanding the built systems. And so it's kind of pulling together new knowledge in different ways.
I'll put a second shout out to some of the stuff that Beth mentioned. There's some neat things or neat opportunities that are coming just because the state has some major water challenges that the state agencies are having to address. And so they're turning to a lot of places, but one of the places they're turning is to Utah State as a place where they can get some solutions that that I guess are a little less politically loaded than they might get from other places. It's a little easier for them to point to a report or a recommendation from here as they make their decision, rather than saying, well, the agency came up with this on our own. But another thing I'll point to as just kind of an example of something I'm aware of outside of the university that is kind of, has been a pretty productive connection between industry and researchers, university researchers, is the Irrigation Innovation Consortium. So that's out of Colorado State, that's where it's administered from, but that was funded through an FBAR grant. FBAR is the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research. So it's a federally sponsored nonprofit. But FBAR wants research that is collaborative with industry. And so the IIC, my understanding is they went and asked for like $5 million, and FBAR came back and said that's not enough, you need to think bigger. So they went back and asked for $25 million and pulled in a bunch of other institutions, and now they then distribute smaller grant awards to researchers in those partner institutions. But everything they do has to have an industry partner that has real skin in the game somehow. It can't just be, well, so-and-so wrote, from this company or that company wrote a letter of recommendation, and they're totally happy to sit in a meeting once with us. There has to be real connection there. That, I think, is important. I recently participated in a panel that had a lot more technology that was kind of pseudoscience stuff, which is really frustrating. So having those partnerships where we have people in the real world connecting with people here on campus, where we're kind of ties us to the ground but also keeps science real, I think there's a lot of potential there.
Great introduction to the next question. We've talked about the connection to industry. We've talked through Courtney's comments about cross-cutting research projects. And so now I'm going to ask you each to project into the future. And so now we're looking out 5 to 10 years. and we're thinking, what are those research challenges that we as researchers want to have at the forefront of our minds that have the greatest potential for impact and innovation? And so maybe from each of your perspectives, I'd like to hear your thoughts.
So my perspective is going to come from the ag side of things, but I think looking towards science that will improve, whoever, societies, a certain sector, but people's ability to make decisions rapidly or to automate decision making. I say that because from the agriculture standpoint, people can say, well, why aren't farmers adopting this method or that method for irrigating a crop, right? Well, go spend a few minutes with a farmer or spend half a day with them and ask them, what decisions do they have to make? It's like anybody else. We have a lot of decisions to make and we only have so much time to do it. And so some things, you've got to find things you can automate. And so if that means that automation means irrigating without a lot of thought, that's automated, right? Well, there's other ways to automate these kind of things.
I think looking at Ryan over here, and I think that one of the things we've got to continue working, but accelerate it even faster, is on the water quality realm. I'm thinking about these contaminants beyond the sort of classic ones we've already been addressing for a long time, the nutrients and so forth, but the forever chemicals, the PFAS, the pharmaceuticals, the nanoparticles, the things that maybe not particularly regulated, although they're beginning to be, but they're there and they are affecting our health. I think it's about looking at water scarcity in new ways and thinking about it, with that old adage, what's that Coleridge rhyme, the water everywhere, but ne'er a drop to drink. Kind of problem, and I think we're increasingly facing those kinds of risks. I'd say the next big challenge is to really think about inequalities and disparities in terms of access to to water and to quality water, and how our societies here and around the world is pretty stratified. There are a lot of haves. There's haves, but then there's a lot of have-nots. And how do we think about the basic interests all the way up in terms of protecting the well-being of people, because water is that most essential component to life.
One big aspect of my water management is irrigation. As a power company, we do provide water to much of the Bear River Basin. And so my thinking kind of goes more towards kind of more practical, maybe less ethereal research kind of perspectives, but just with the seemingly common sense change in water law that you can kind of take saved water and kind of make better use of that, and particularly in the context of the Great Salt Lake. It's seemingly kind of a small change, but institutionally it's a big deal. And so I think that there are a lot of implications and research questions or extension applications of knowledge that already exists to kind of help with all of the agricultural optimization money going in, to help quantify that, to help identify the amounts of water that's saved. And it does get pretty difficult. And I thought in passing, I heard at one of the recent conferences somebody say, well, you'll never be able to quantify the evaporation. And I think at some point we have to put uncertainty bounds, and even if it's plus or minus 100%, people don't really understand. All they hear is the middle value, and that's what they take. So with uncertainty, get your best guess as to how much water was saved. And there's a lot of work to be put into kind of some of the more gory details of kind of just that, the science side of how much was saved and the application of the water laws to convey that, but some of Beth's recent research kind of helping identify the instrumentation gaps that help make that possible is a good step in the right direction. And so I think there's a lot of good work to be done in that direction coming forward, because I believe that the amounts of money coming into that arena for improving those agricultural uses of water are going to be larger and larger and be a big deal to help us with the Great Salt Lake situation.
So I think that we have to change people's relationship with water and their expectations. I'm going to now put on my Courtney hat. We just switched roles here somehow. But in my mind, we live in a completely altered hydrologic system. We have taken water out of rivers and streams and reservoirs, and we've distributed it all over the valley floors. And that has created a different hydrologic fabric, if you will, that we live in. And as we start thinking about water differently, we are trying to go through and change pieces of that where we have depended on the inefficiencies in our system to make all of our water needs work, believe it or not. Now, as we try to make them more efficient in a piecemeal fashion, I'm concerned that we don't actually know what the consequences are. And so people think that the water that has been, the water that's been in the river at their particular location, that's not going to change if they start piping things adjacent, canals adjacent to a river. So I think that we have expectations that our hydrologic system isn't going to change as we start changing pieces of it. But I think it will, and we don't actually understand how. And that's a huge research challenge, because tracking all of the subtleties of this altered hydrologic system that we have in place that we don't quite understand, and then we start changing components of that, we don't understand the consequences. I have a feeling there's going to be unintended consequences that are going to come out of that in terms of water availability.
Now we've thought about the future a bit together for the next 5 to 10 years. And so now I want to take us into what are the advantages USU has. We have various areas of expertise. We have the ability to do cross-cutting research. We have resources like the Utah Water Research Laboratory. And so I'm looking at how can USU researchers really take advantage of those questions to really be key players for our future.
I guess I have the microphone. So I think that one of the things that we need to do is we are currently being asked in a lot of different areas to help resolve some of our local and statewide water-related problems, as was mentioned earlier. And even those of us who are all working together on projects are having a hard time tracking all of the different pieces and figuring out how everything fits together. I think there needs to be some sort of, I guess, coordination or oversight into how do we make it so all of our individual parts sum to something greater and have greater impact, because we are all individually trying to address different state problems or fundamental research problems, but there's still, the pieces aren't necessarily being added together perfectly. And I think that there's a missed opportunity there if we can figure out how to tie those together better. And I'm not saying I have any idea how to do that. I'm just saying that that is something that could really make it so USU has a huge impact, because we have a lot of expertise that can help resolve part of these very big problems that don't just plague Utah. They plague the Great Salt Lake Basin, the Colorado River Basin, and the entire Intermountain West. So it is not, we are not dealing with unique problems here locally. They are very broad spread.
So I didn't really appreciate kind of some of the statewide approaches to education and the university system when I was a student here, but just how Utah State has been focused and is kind of relied on greatly to be the water repository of kind of research and knowledge, and then also just coming to realize the importance of kind of the multidisciplinary aspects, the social aspects of water that are very important and that do require a lot of multidisciplinary research. And also I think the extension assignment, for lack of a better word, that is relied upon at Utah State for statewide dissemination of research information is also really important. And so kind of combining those two aspects and kind of makes kind of an important framework and role for Utah State to play.
I think that we have a great advantage here at USU, and that's sort of our size and the size of our faculty, is that we're not so big that we can just get siloed away from each other. We need each other, and we've learned that through projects and funded things, and we've come at complex problems. We've had to look at the gaps between what we do and put our heads together around that. And I think that that's an asset we have. We know people across campus. I mean, we're in the same circles. We're at spring runoff, or we're at a thing like this, where we're on projects together. We on grad student committees together. We just have to interact because of our, at the size level we are. And that's, I think, a huge asset. I was at a Big Ten university before I came here, and it was challenging. I was at a more junior stage, but I heard this from the senior faculty. It was really hard to get out of your building and your college and your department to work across disciplines and so forth. And we just seem to do it increasingly more often and more readily. And so I think it comes down to the word relationships. We care about each other, we're good colleagues, and we know that we need each other to look at these big complex problems. And so that's, I think, one of the things we need to lean into as we move forward on these challenges, because the National Academy's report on Earth systems moving into the next generation, we very much said that we can't do it alone anymore. We have to find spaces, and not just within academia. We have to think about our relationships beyond science and beyond university. These relationships with our government agencies that are relevant, our industry partners, our local communities, and so forth. And because we're the land-grant university, we really know how to do this. And so I think that's those relationships are key to our success.
I'll build off a couple things. One, I'm an extension guy, and I love extension. So we have that strength of people that are technically competent all over the state. There's no river basin, large or small, that isn't served by somebody who would be a great collaborator. On the social science side and on the physical science side. So people that are in the communities, and so I think that is important to be aware of. In extension, we're pretty aware of it. Those on campus that are in extension, but those here who aren't in extension, I encourage you to get to know, who our extension faculty colleagues are throughout the state. The other thing that now I have to remember it because it was good. No. Yeah. Anyway, that was the big thing, but there was something else that I had thought of, but you probably don't need to hear it because I can't remember it now. But it tied in. Somebody else already mentioned something that tied along with it, so you'd hear double. So let's call it good.
Okay, so let's have you pass the mic all the way down, because I'm going to throw out a question that I didn't tell the panelists beforehand, but I just like to put it out there. One of the things President Cantwell is doing for, I think, her senior leadership right now, is pointing us towards things to read, to make us really think about our futures. And they may be in our areas of expertise, they may be in general areas, but just to make us kind of think outside the box. And so if I had to ask each of you around your area, is there something you've read or something you've seen that's pushed you to think a little bit different or a little bit creative about your research? See, I sprung the question on him.
Yeah, and you handed me the microphone.
And I had to invest the microphone. It might even be a discussion you had with someone.
I think the discussions that I've had with people and what I've read and this is, you know, it's not some wonderful book or something. Oftentimes they're newspaper articles quoting oftentimes the agricultural community. And in my conversations with many of the agricultural water users, their perspective on water and the role of water in their life and their ideas about conservation or what they think people mean by conservation, I have been pretty stunned at how little we have educated some of our biggest water users about what we mean by conservation and what we don't mean by that. And so I think that some of the most important information that I have gathered is just these interactions with the agricultural community and the real need for, one, data, and two, information that doesn't feel threatening. And this is something that Extension is working very hard at, but it's hard to reach the masses. So to me, that has changed my ideas about how I communicate with the general public about what we need to do to solve problems and how to actually frame some of the solutions in the context of a solution to maybe one of their problems. Sometimes it's hard to think in these big scales when you're just trying to survive. So it's been very good for me to have that perspective. So it's not necessarily, I guess I've read a lot, but a lot of interactions with different users.
So a few months ago, I came up to actually it was a graduate research awards panel that I came to listen, and because Dr. Manu Lal was there. And one of the things that he said is that, well, I read Nature magazine. I read it every month, every week when it comes, and so I was excited and thought, hey, that's a good idea. I'd like to follow these footsteps, so I signed up to that, and it's very challenging. It's such a broad research, and it's also very detailed, and it's kind of difficult to kind of read, and I kind of skip through things, but it just opens the mind to kind of see the pinnacle of research and innovative thinking, and just trying to kind of broaden my horizons and kind of take in kind of what are some of the lessons of just very innovative research across a wide range of fields. Even if I don't quite understand, I can at least read the abstract and try to look at some of the terms. But yeah, just trying to open my mind. It's been quite interesting and a challenge.
Yeah, I think Manu's either not sleeping or he's arrived at some new pinnacle to read something cover to cover once a month. Are you kidding me? That's not happening. But I too would say, you know, the conversations with real people in real places are absolutely so critical. And I'm just going to geek out for a minute and say there's an article from 2020 by David Freeman that really changed sort of the sociology of water, but it's a really accessible article, and it's really talking about the importance of local water organizations, that we manage water. Sure, we make big decisions at state and sort of federal levels, but we manage water at really local scales. And how critical it is to understand how varied those systems are, how nested they are in their broader culture and landscapes. And so that's a piece that, you know, it's 24 years old now, but every student of mine will read that paper. And another one that's more recent, Garcia's the last name, and I'm going to forget her first name, but on the role of municipalities for the same sort of reason, that cities are really where we're seeing a lot of, where the rubber sort of meets the road in terms of water supply, water quality, the flooding impacts and so forth. Sort of the nexus of water hazards are coming at cities, and they may not necessarily be fully prepared for that, and really needs to be a focus of our attention. So a couple, nerdy pieces that I've enjoyed, but I would be remiss if I didn't say that those real conversations with real people in real places are probably the most enlightening for me.
So I have two. I like, this is kind of a separate thing outside of water. I like some like those business management books. They're kind of like self-help motivation books, but they're really meant to help rich people like find ways to make it easier to get wealthy or something. So there's a good book called Essentialism, and if you haven't read it, you should listen to it because you don't have time to read it. But the whole point is that none of us has time to do it all, right? So we have to decide what will be most impactful and put our efforts there. The other thing that, besides reading, books written by Stanford and Harvard Business School faculty is history. Reading some of the history. This is something I don't do. I'm pretending like I do this. But related to water, right? If some of those conversations look a whole lot like some of the conversations that we're having now, and I think it's worthwhile to sometimes spend time, in the library. It used to be on the edge of the quad.
Well, let's thank our panel for their insightful comments. Courtney, if you just want to stay, I think.
She's going to talk for a while.
Okay, thank you. So, I wanted to end with that question, because what I'm listening to for the second time right now is a book President Cantwell gave me called Team of Teams, which is by General Stanley McChrystal. And it emphasizes from a military perspective and also a business perspective the importance of teamwork in achieving large goals. And so when we talk more with Donnie Elzinga is going to lead the next part of this discussion, but when we talk more about growing our research in water, I think a lot about scaling teams and how we get to bigger type team activities to go after bigger type projects. And so these are the types of conversations I would like to have as a campus. We are a strong campus on an individual level, on maybe a small team's level. We need to make the next leap. And so we need to think collectively of how to do that. So teams. So the next part of what we're going to do today with our proposal external development specialist, Donnie, is think about some of that team building around research. So Donnie, the floor is yours.
So I have 20 minutes today to talk about external funding. Let's move my slides a little bit. So this is kind of where I'm heading in 20 minutes. I want to talk a little bit about me. I'm a new role here in the Office of Research. I just kind of want to tell you a little bit what I can offer you. And then I want to talk about your research interests as a collective. I want to highlight just a few funding opportunities. And then as Lisa hinted at, we're going to have just a quick discussion about developing research partnerships. So just a little quick about me. I am a new role and a new offer of support from the Office of Research. I offer a suite of research development services that can help you and your teams go for bigger, larger, more complex funding opportunities. So kind of the suite of services I offer right now is a funding landscape analysis. If you have a great research project and team that is ready for external funding, I can help you analyze the funding landscape and find a good fit for your work. I spend a lot of time in the funding landscape. Also, if you have a particular funding opportunity that you are interested in going after, I can help you analyze that and identify the priorities and the key things that you need to have in place to submit a competitive proposal. And then finally, I can help you with strategic planning. Talking about peeking out, that is like my favorite thing to do. So this works best if we're a little ways out from where you're submitting your proposal, but I can help you get all those key pieces in place to get your proposal over the finish line and competitive for funding. So there's a QR code, reach out. The more I know about you and your work and what you're doing, I can help you connect with funding opportunities. Okay, so now I want to talk about you a little bit. The #1 goal that we have in this research summit is to give you a platform and an opportunity to get together and to meet and to network and collaborate. So if you all will pull out your smartphones and scan this QR code, I want to know what aspect of the water topic are you interested in investigating. So it should pull up a poll everywhere. We are going to develop a word cloud together. And if it asks you to register something, just skip that part. But I'm going to have you pull it up. It works best if you just put in one word, because it's going to chunk it up into their own individual words. So what aspect of this water topic are you interested in investigating? So I'm going to give you a second to grab that QR code. Hope it's working for you all. If it's not, let me know. And then I'm going to go to this next slide. I'll give you a couple more seconds. And our wizard research communication team, I think, has helped me. Oh, Nathan, you did great, thanks. Interesting, so this is building a live word cloud of what we're interested in. And you can do more than one, put more than one if you have multiple interests or multiple projects. Oh, super cool. So you guys all know how word clouds work, but when the words get bigger, that means there's more synergy on those topics. Look at data, that's like a winner in there. Oh no, someone's entering data over and over. Who's ruining the word cloud? There's our culprit. If you're interested in data, come talk to Jeff right here. Oh, it looks like agriculture. Oh, interesting. Conservation, lakes, water quality, wastewater. Oh, that's super interesting. Oh, machine learning emulation. Okay, I'm gonna go to the water because this is really cool. Interesting. So a lot of interesting topics, maybe some synergy around some of these. And probably a lot of different expertise coming at these issues from different, this is cool. I'm gonna save this word cloud later. Cool. Well, I encourage you, the next section of the event today we have planned just opens time and space for you to network. So I encourage you, oh, people keep adding, this is great. I encourage you to connect and find those individuals who are interested in what you're interested in and see if you can collaborate. And like Lisa said, think big and build bigger teams. Thank you for participating. I really appreciate that. All right, I'm gonna move on. Anyone else want to add anything? Oh, there was something else. Oh, this is fun. This is my new favorite thing. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, I want to highlight a few funding opportunities. Here's a QR code to our summit webpage. We have built a webpage just for this event, and it has a lot more funding opportunities around this topic of water that you can go look in. So we have some federal level, some state level. We have a link to a curated search list. You can click, it'll take you to Grant Forward. So there's a lot more opportunities, but I'm just gonna highlight 3 that really piqued my interest and felt relevant to the USU enterprise. Okay, so the first one is with the National Science Foundation. So this program is Civil Infrastructure Systems. This supports fundamental and innovative research in the design, operation, and management of civil infrastructure that contributes to creating smart, sustainable, and resilient communities. This program was interesting to me as I prepared for today. It supports research through a lot of different mechanisms. They have career awards, collaborative, rapid awards. They've already had 3 awards. These rapid awards based on that bridge collapse out east. So this is just a really interesting program to me. Many of the awards work deeply within the communities, developing strategies and looking at consumer behavior. And when I analyze a funding program, I like to look at it from a lot of different angles. So this is a map of our country and all the awards that have been given in this program. And if I had to predict, their portfolio is probably primed for the right project in the western side of the United States. That is my guess. So if we had the right project, I don't know, I think it's interesting. So there's the first funding opportunity I wanted to highlight. The second is through the Bureau of Reclamation. So they have a Water Smart Grant program. Most of them are for local municipalities to help them build up their infrastructure. However, universities are eligible through the Applied Science grants if we partner with an entity that has water delivery authority. Like their number one goal is to help communities develop better water modeling and forecasting tools. They've funded in like the last 3 years 539 projects with over 230 million. So this funding announcement last year was announced in June, so I suspect this year's will be out in the next few months. So it's time to develop partnerships if this is interesting to you and your team. And then finally, the USDA, I just want to highlight one more. So the Conservation Reserve Program, what that program is for a yearly rental payment, farmers getting that rental payment, they pull a section of their land out of production and instead plant species that will improve environmental health and quality. So the long-term goal of the program is to improve the water quality and prevent soil erosion and things like that. So this is an opportunity to evaluate that program, which is a wonderful opportunity for you to establish yourself as a leader to dictate the future of this program, what is working, what isn't, and what could be better. Okay, those are the funding opportunities. Oh, and I had to throw in this one. There is a request for information out. If you are interested in drinking water contaminants, and I can't remember if drinking water was on our word cloud, but there is a new initiative and they are looking for what should our research priorities be. So this is a great way to establish yourself and your work as an expert and to dictate future funding opportunities. So that's due in June. Okay, so I have just a few more minutes. Like Lisa and the panel mentioned, as we prepared for today, we recognize the complexity of solving the water issues faced in our region. We recognize the need for big teams to solve these big problems. So I wanted to invite Courtney back up and pick her brain for just a minute on developing research teams. So Courtney, thank you. Thank you for coming back up. Let me give you this. Let's see. Okay. So, you already hinted a little bit at that. So I just have a few questions for Courtney and talking about developing research partnerships. So, Courtney, how have you found and developed research partnerships in your work?
Yeah, I will say that a lot of opportunities have come to me. I mean, that's one thing about being a social scientist, is that we, in the natural resource arena, we are often a little fewer and further between. And so sometimes people are coming to put that strategic social scientist on and give them $5,000 or $6,000 on a $20 million grant. Expect them to do most of it. But only partially kidding. So I have to be honest and say that a lot of opportunities have come to me, and it was being brought to you as part of the Utah project, the big EPSCOR grant we had on water, was this big, huge, opportunity to dive in and have partnerships at the ready. But I think it's important that in building relationships, and these are relationships, what has helped me it guided me is, we don't have any of these here, but don't work with jerks. And this hasn't really been relevant here, but it has in previous lifetimes. You're going to find people that kind of are a good match, that you can have a fun conversation and a life conversation as well as a work conversation that you enjoy being with, you enjoy digging in, you enjoy the exchange with. And so, we spend a lot of time in these partnerships, and we need to enjoy the people that we work with. And so first and foremost, think about that assemblage is, I think, an important thing to the partnerships.
Yeah. So how do you find, and maybe vet is the wrong word, but those people, do you work together on smaller scales first and then find that there's a good synergy? And
Well, scale is really important and a hard thing I think to find, because these are such big issues and big challenges. And if you take on too much, you get yourself overstretched and you can't necessarily address all of the dimensions of the problem. If it's too small, there may not be enough space for everybody to kind of be themselves and find their own niche. And so finding the right scale and thinking about making sure you have really good clarity over the partner's research questions. And I need to understand the research questions of my partners. I don't need to understand their science and I need to know what they're interested in, and I want them to understand what I'm interested in too. We have to find some of that synergy. Well, we don't have to do each other's work or even really understand it, but we need to have some comprehension of that. So I'm looking for people willing to have those conversations and really think about what our objectives are together. And again, that's a scale thing. I mean, I'm part of, Dave, Jeff, and I are part of a really big $15 million, big, huge NSF thing right now, and there are still people on that project. Some people I don't even know. And so scaling projects and finding partnerships that will cover and help you address the kind of right scale of question that you want to do, but not too big that it becomes atomizes or gets too diffuse.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. I just run that question on you. So what advice do you have for people who are looking to develop those relationships and start building research teams?
Yeah, well, I've already thrown out a few things. I guess one piece of advice I would say is don't underestimate the role of technicians and staff. I think the most enlightening partnership and one of the best, the most effective glue of a partnership that I've experienced since being here at USU is with Jeff's former assistant Amber. Someone who's very capable, extremely capable, and whose work it is to do exactly that thing that your partnership is meant to work on. Because as faculty, we do 100 billion other things besides this project. We are teaching, we have grad students, we have committees, we have things like this, we have all kinds of things that we do, but that technical staff is really important. So thinking about not just the partners amongst, at the sort of the faculty or the researcher level, but that technical staff. And then always think about those real world partners that are going to be important to making sure your work is relevant, that it's addressing those needs and questions, that is a conduit of information and coming in from the outside. So always trying to find those beyond academic partners, I think, is really important too. So those are two things, I guess, pieces of advice in addition to work with people that you like and can get along with, because sometimes these are long projects that have bumps along the way and you have to be able to navigate them together with people.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So on the flip side of that, what are common pitfalls or things that you recommend avoiding or working on to start?
A badly envisioned budget is really a big problem.
That got a lot of chuckles.
When you're not having enough money to do what really needs to be done is a problem. Just carefully, we often throw a budget together really fast, I think. And I have learned to maybe step back and take a little bit more time on that budget question because, yeah, you can move things around in terms of salary, but you might not have quite what you need. And to hire that technical staff, or I hire a ton of undergraduates. Have I really remembered to put that into my budgets? No, but I then borrow from Rob Peter to pay Paul to bring in undergraduates because that's a key part of what we do. Pitfalls are a badly envisioned and designed budget. I think the other thing goes back to that scale thing. How many people do you need in this partnership to address the question? And again, if it's too big, people just kind of go off and do their own thing. They can hide a little bit more. So maybe you start with a big question and then pare it down to something that is a little more doable with a little bit more of a smaller team. Everybody gets a little more money, a little bit more responsibility, and I think you can do more with a more intimate team than you can with this 50, 60 people teams that I'm on 2 of them right now. They're just kind of a mess.
Okay, thanks. Those are fantastic. So one last question, why work in research teams? What has it helped you and your work accomplish?
Well, for me, whether it's climate change or water or community well-being or whatever it is, I can't answer all the questions by myself. I mean, the problems are so complicated that the answers and the solutions, or even the ways to make progress, right? Solutions is a little bit lofty for some of these wicked problems, but the nuggets of solutions are in the spaces between us. We just need each other, and I think that NSF is recognizing that, and I think other funding agencies as well. So that's been great. I've just learned so much from the people that I've worked with. Secondly, I think the benefit to our students, graduate students, undergraduate students who become part of these research projects, their exposure, we can teach them a lot ourselves, but oh my goodness, their knowledge, their growth, their professional development just grows exponentially when they get to interact with all these partners that you have. And so that's absolutely essential for mentoring and training the next cadre of professionals and researchers. We've also done some pretty cool things. I mean, we've, through a partnership with Ryan and Neil Allen, who was here, he's retired, we contributed a state report on water reuse, right? I don't know how impactful it was, but we were told that it was important at that time. Sometimes it's what you can do with and for a community. You can have actual real impact within the water arena or whatever it is, the arena you're studying, and being a part of seeing some of those impacts come to fruition is really rewarding.
Yeah. Thank you. Anything else you want to add? No. Okay. Thank you for your time, Courtney. And we have linked some of the leading team science resources on the Research Summit webpage, so please be sure to check those out on developing communication and collaboration plans and things like that, and let us support you too. So thank you, Courtney, for your time.
I watched all of you as Courtney talked about a poorly designed budget. That got more reaction than almost anything else in this room. So as we think about growing research at USU, one of the first steps we took this year is we increased the proposal development support in a number of colleges. I'll just point out, College of Engineering, you now have 3 people, I believe. And so we are working as best we can. Jerry Hansen is here, who leads that team. And I've charged her with trying to get that young team up and functioning at a high level as fast as we can. But at many colleges, we've added support. So those budget questions, we want to head off before those proposals go in. That's the same reason we brought Donnie on board, to help us look at this and make sure we're right-sizing proposals before they go in. And so that's something I've been thinking about. Something keeps me awake at night right now is how do we manage on the backside? How do we manage once an award is here? And that's an area where we have tremendous room for growth. And so I am thinking about that now to support your research. So that ends our formal program today. We hope it's giving you some stimulating thoughts. We're all going to be here for a little while longer, so please help yourself to more food, interact with your colleagues, maybe build on some of the ideas that were presented. And we just value having you here. And please reach out with comments and questions to us. We're here to support you. Yeah, Ryan.
So just a general question. I mean, it seems like part of at least our group, challenges in terms of research is students. We're having a hard time attracting really good students. And we struggle with that. I'm wondering if there's anything in the research office or the upper administration that's trying to help with recruiting in general for the people that actually do the work.
Yeah, I get that totally. I'm seeing it in a number of areas across campus. I'll talk to you about the steps we've taken, and then I'll talk about the pressures I'm applying. So first of all, in our startup packages for new faculty, we have consistently indicated to department heads that we want to pay a competitive rate in those startups. So for our new faculty, we are seeing higher levels of support for students, and we are fully supporting that so that our new faculty can recruit in with competitive stipends to other institutions. We also continue our PDRF program, where we provide funds to help recruit outstanding students to individual laboratories across colleges. I am pressuring the administration, the president and the provost, around the state-funded lines. We have to do something around the state level of support for graduate students that are sitting in our TA positions. Those funds have not been increased in years, and I will continue to pressure as hard as I can. The same thing is for student health insurance. If we're going to recruit students, we have to be able to provide health insurance. Last year, I don't know how much you know about this, but last year the students received the first sizable increase in years. They received a 6% salary increase, in some cases more. At the same time, we had a pretty steep increase in their insurance costs. Last year, none of that insurance cost was passed along to the students. The Office of Research, the provost, and the president partnered to pay that gap. I asked the president about it this week, if I'm going to contribute to addressing that gap again this year. Well, I didn't get an answer. I think my non-answer was a yes. So we're trying to do some things, but in my mind, that's to give ourselves time more to talk to the state. Graduate students are an incredibly important part here, and we have to talk about their importance with the state. Dennis.
Along those lines, has there been any discussion about what to do about perhaps subsidized housing? Because one of the big things is not just the stipend, but the cost of living.
I have not been involved in a conversation like that. However, I'm aware of the problem, and I thank you for the comment. I will try to bring it up in conversations. My own students have told me what outrageous increases they've witnessed in their housing in the last year or two. So, good point. I'll take a few more from the floor if there's anybody else. Otherwise, these sessions are meant to spur ideas and creative thinking. And so if something comes to mind afterward, please reach out to me. Happy to have a conversation to talk about the particular issues in your area. Yes, Jeff.
I do have a question about research staff. So Courtney emphasized the importance of research staff, research engineers, research scientists, whatever their titles are. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we have to tell those research people when we hire them is, oh, by the way, you're a second-class citizen because you earn leave, but you have to take it in the year that you earn that leave because you're paid on research contracts and grants, and you're not the same as everybody else. And so the message that we give them from the very beginning is, we love you, we want you, but you're not the same. And so it's hard to recruit really good talent and keep really good talent when the job market is just so ridiculously competitive for good people right now.
Yeah, you probably know that's in my inbox right now. Yes, and I thank both Regan Zane and David Tarbotten and others for bringing that forward. I believe we are scheduled to meet and talk about that. That is an issue that was brought up in the past. We've got to find a way. I don't know what that looks like right now, but I'm happy to have the conversations with HR. Several of my staff are here. I don't know if there's any HR people here because I'm going to make an HR comment. But one of the things we find in research is that we're having to show HR the way in some places. For example, it's very hard for my office, Jeff, to retain individuals to do things like work in our Human Research Protections Program or work in sponsored programs. We've had to introduce them to we've had to introduce HR to how we need the system to work for us.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because I had to convince them that there was such a job title as software engineer.
Yeah, so this is some of the things we're having to work through as well. Jerry Hansen has stories about this, Amber Buick has stories about this, and we continue to work with them. Just today, I spent time with our Human Research Protections Program to go back to HR and have the same conversation about how do we structure positions that really support research. So again, thank you to Regan's team, to David for bringing this leave question back into the forefront. Happy to have it and just kind of toss out what are our options and think about it. No solutions in my mind yet, but I haven't had much of a chance to analyze them either. So, okay, with that, I tell you to enjoy the rest of your time here. Enjoy the view of this spectacular facility, and again, thank you for being here.